Hi everyone, it's me, Max Haddad. Welcome back, and if this is your first time, welcome. I just got back from taking the dog on a walk, and it is cold. I don't know if it snowed where you're at, but it finally snowed here, and it's officially winter. Welcome. And this is the light that I use. This background purple thing happening, blue, is the thing that I use when I'm streaming or like recording games and things like that for my gaming channel. But I thought I would use it today to just make it more festive. So today I thought we would talk about prison tattoos, the ins and outs of prison tattoos, getting hair in my mouth, getting prison tattoos, how guys build the go away, how guys build the guns, the prison, ink guns, how they get the ink, they actually make the ink, how they make the ink, and how crazy it can get sometimes giving people tattoos. So most of my experience with tattoos in prison came from two places. One was my next door neighbor for about 4 months. The last 4 months that I was in was I don't want to say high ranking, but he was somebody with a lot of experience, part of the Saxon Knights gang affiliation. They don't like to be called a gang, but whatever. Saxon Knights is a white pride organization, but it's way, way, way less hateful than, say, like the Aryans can be. They even really aren't as bad as maybe TV makes them look sometimes. Some of them are awful, but the Saxon Knights are more about being happy about being white than hating people for being black. If there are any Aryans listening, don't hate me. I'm sure you already do. So Dad's Lebanese, so it's like a given. And he was very, very active as a tattoo artist. That was how he made all of his money. So when I first met him, he showed up to our dorm and had nothing. I mean, he had his brothers, his friends that were part of this, gang with him. And so he knew people, but he literally had no food. He borrowed some food from me, which he did pay back. I could tell he was a trustworthy dude just by the way that he carried himself, but nothing. And next thing you know, his box was full of food, full of hygiene products, full of extra clothes that he was never going to use. But he had, fresh boxers, fresh undershirts, food for months and months, much longer than he was going to be there for probably. And it was all from tattooing. He had, I believe, purchased this tattoo gun from somebody. The origin story of this specific tattoo gun is really interesting because you have to get a motor for the gun, right? The thing that makes the needle go bzz. That's the most difficult part. The rest of it is basically made out of tape, plastic from different things, pens, the inside of a pen. The batteries that we get in prison are not your typical battery because people will empty them of the battery acid and use the battery acid to burn people with. So they are like ionized needles, not sharp needles, but semi-sharp needles. So you break the battery open and you sharpen the needle on cement, on a brick somewhere, and that becomes part of the gun as well, or at least it was for this one. But the motor, the hardest thing to get, came from a disk drive in one of the counselor's computers in her very, very, very locked office. So the way that they got this, they asked, and full disclosure, I wasn't there when this happened, so this is all hearsay, but prison is one of those things that is very much stranger than fiction. So you don't really have to make anything up. So I believe the guys that were telling me this, and they weren't guys to create a myth anyway. So the way that they got this was they went into a broom closet where we would get our cleaning supplies, things like that. Something that we would get into multiple times a day with the permission of the guard. He would unlock the door. We would go in, get the cleaning stuff out, clean up. I say we, not me, but you get it. And one of these times, somebody else, after they got, let into this broom closet, went up, started talking to the guard to distract him. They literally climbed through the ceiling of this broom closet, which was right beside the counselor's office. And, it's like one of those office ceilings where it's those big square, I don't know what they're made out of, plaster tiles. Was able to remove them, go up, got on top of the counselor's office, And as he was trying to, remove it, and the counselor wasn't in there, obviously. These aren't, like ninjas. This was just, nobody was in there. The lights were off, and there was only one guard in the dorm at the time. As he's trying to remove this tile, he falls through. He fell through the ceiling into the counselor's office. Loud noise, obviously. Guard immediately knew. Gets him out of there. Dude gets in a lot of trouble. But in, this much time, he was able to remove the disk drive from this computer, something that this guy had obviously done before. They sent somebody who knew what he was doing, had experience getting the thing out real quick. Got the motor somehow and tossed it to somebody discreetly before the guard could figure out what had happened. And the guard probably didn't even have an idea that he was going in there for the motor. A lot of times the guards are pretty naive. They have a very vague idea of what is actually going on behind the scenes. They just know that if somebody's doing drugs, stop them. If somebody's fighting, stop them. Past that, all the subtle stuff that's going on, they don't know how we do it. There are definitely some guards there that are smarter, more experienced, wiser to the prison ways, and have figured it out. But this guard was apparently not one of them. Something too, if somebody has, let's say, a shiv, a shank, a knife, prison knife, something like that, or this motor, drugs that they don't want the guards to get, but they realize the guards are onto them, or literally like chasing them, getting ready to tackle them to take this thing. They can even know that they have this thing. They will throw it to somebody else, and then that person will throw it to somebody else, and the guards can't keep track of it. So they end up going back, checking the cameras. They can't keep track of it because people are really good at hiding things. If all you have is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for years to get good at hiding stuff, keeping it from the guards, you get really good at navigating your way in the prison. So they'll check the cameras. They can't find it. They'll literally shut down the dorm, bring in a bunch of people, dogs, sniff for it, can't find it. They'll find a few things and they'll brag about, yeah, we got your, and it's like, yeah, dude, we got 20 more of those out back. It's whatever. Again, not really me. I was laying on my bed reading books, so unless they were confiscating books, I was pretty safe. But saw it happen multiple times with drugs, a motor one time, which they actually did get that one, and knives. But this motor, they managed to build a gun with. Crazy. So next, how do you get ink in prison? It's not pen ink. Some people do prison tattoos on others with pen ink, and typically it's the kind of tattoo where they have a sharp object with the ink on the end. They have, something that they're dipping this needle into, something that has the ink in it, and then they're hammering it into the person's skin. Not crazy hard, but I'm sure it doesn't feel great to get the shape that they want. You can tell if something's been hammered in versus with a gun. It'll have dots. I mean, it's like pointillism. It will definitely have dots. You can see it, and they're typically done by artists who aren't as good as the people with the guns. There are a couple exceptions, but that is usually not the case. That's why they're called exceptions. So if you use pen ink, it'll fall out really quickly. So it'll be somebody that just ends up with this little lame-ass scar with maybe a couple black dots in it, and that's it. They had to make the ink that they were using. The way that they did this is they would have to create a controlled burn. So something that was going to burn for a long time that they would have to keep adding to, and something above it that would capture the soot from the fire. And they'd have to create a device that was going to hold all the smoke into it so the guards couldn't smell it. Now, it was never going to be a perfect system, so sure, they were walking around this thing, spraying, waving, like running showers, doing everything that they could to get this thing to not smell. And it really didn't smell if they were doing it right. The one that I saw, believe it or not, was made out of 2 boxes of saltine crackers. That was the tower that they had built, and they put it on top of a toilet. It wasn't high enough above the stall walls so that you could see. We were lucky enough to have the stall walls between the toilets. Again, not in the shower. If you saw yesterday's video, watch it. So you couldn't see it, and the guards didn't come into the bathroom unless something was happening in the bathroom that shouldn't be happening, right? A couple of the guards would do like not searches. They would walk in and like patrol the bathroom, but just peek their head in. So they still couldn't have seen this thing. And as long as it didn't smell, you couldn't find it. So it was just sitting on top of this toilet. Everybody in the dorm knew, whoever was making this ink, don't fiddle with it. And there was always this kind of like, cool, this dude's making, like everybody kind of enjoyed getting away with something. And I'm not going to lie, even though I was sitting on my bed reading a book, it always felt a little cool knowing something was happening behind the guard's back that wasn't getting anybody hurt. Minus like people getting, HIV from prison tattoos, but I'm not taking, responsibility for them getting that. I'm just saying it was neat having somebody make prison ink with soot from burning paper on top of a toilet. That was pretty cool. The guy that I knew who made prison ink, well, at least in the dorm that I was at, because tattoos were happening all over the prison. I think there were like 3 or 4 tattoo guns, maybe a few more on the entire prison, and there was only one in our dorm. So there was basically one guy that was doing it. Other people would rent that gun from him, but that was really expensive, and it super cut into the money that they were making from actually giving the tattoo. And to be honest, this guy was by far the best at it, so everybody wanted tattoos from him. The guy that was making the ink, his name was Tool. I never knew his first name. He was an Aryan. I think he was 3rd on camp. And his name was Tool because he was a meth addict. His girlfriend was a meth addict. Girlfriend stole a bunch of money from him, and he chased her down and kidnapped her with a tire tool. And that was the charge that he had done the most time for. He ended up doing 14 years for, I think, attempted murder, something like that. He would have told you that he loved her, that he still loved her. He wasn't trying to kill her, but anyway, so he had tire tool written across his knuckles. So everybody called him Tool. Seemed like a good dude, was clearly a smart guy, at least, good with his hands, knew how to make prison ink. And so he was getting paid to make the ink. He wasn't a tattoo artist himself, and this other guy would give the tattoos, make the tattoos, draw the tattoos, whatever it's called. Now, the process of actually getting a tattoo is you had to know the guy that did it. It was common knowledge, and if you didn't know, you could just ask. Nobody's keeping that a secret unless you were somebody that super wasn't trustworthy. But basically, everybody knew because you could see when somebody was getting a tattoo. There was always one person lying on the bed, the other guy sitting next to him where you could hear this zzzz, and somebody else would be sitting on the bed or standing nearby and just looking around for the guards, just keeping an eye out. And the tattoos would take 8 hours. That person was going to stand there for 8 hours. Typically, it was somebody that was probating, like a novice, a new member, or a potential member of one of these gangs, and they would get the shitty job of having to stand there and just look around forever. Guards come, they would yell, "White hat." The reason that we yelled "white hat," and I didn't get into that because I thought it was stupid, like I was somehow enabling bad behavior. But people would yell "white hat" because the sergeants and the captains, maybe just the captains at this prison, used to wear white hats. So they would yell "white hat" or walking. Walking meant the cops were walking around looking for stuff. They had gloves on. Typically people wouldn't yell walking unless they had gloves on, because gloves on, latex gloves, meant that they were about to do a search. So hide everything basically is what it meant. So somebody is, giving somebody a tattoo. Dude who's standing watch sees somebody, the cops walking, they'll yell "white hat," they'll yell "walking," that sort of thing. And they were careful to not yell "white hat" all the time. Typically it was only when sergeant, captain, that kind of thing, somebody higher up was in the dorm, because those people were more serious about finding the stuff. So be on your best behavior at least until that person leaves, that kind of thing. It was like, let's bite the bullet now, behave while he's around, so our life 3 hours from now is not a nightmare, that kind of thing. People paid for tattoos. Like I said, Josh, my neighbor who had made all that, money. It's basically money because you can give somebody food in prison, enough of it, for drugs on the outside. Say your girlfriend is in heroin withdrawal. You need to get her heroin. She's broke. You can give this dude $20 worth of ramen noodle soup, and some guy on the outside is going to give your girlfriend enough heroin so that she gets well, she gets out of withdrawal. It's crazy. There are as many drugs in prison as there are on the street. So that was used as currency a lot. I'd say about half and half drugs, half food for the tattoos. Hygiene products, shampoos and things like that. But typically if something was worth $7, but it was hygiene, they would only take it for like $5 or $3.50, that kind of thing, because there was so much hygiene stuff going around. You wanted food that was way more useful to you. Anybody would take food. You wanted food. Most of the people dealt in drugs. I didn't when I was selling food and things like that, but definitely for tattoos. So you, like I said, pay with, I'm not going to get into specifics, but basically synthetic marijuana and some other things, or summer sausage. I mentioned ramen noodle soup, bags of fish like sardines, tuna, things like that. You know, cookies, knockoff Oreos, these weird, you know, bottom shelf Doritos, gas station food, Twinkies, not name brand, stuff like that. You weren't giving anybody vegetables, but occasionally, every so often on a Friday, we could order way in advance and get, I think it was called Fresh Favors, which was, you know, like a cheeseburger that was made fresh for you. And it was worse than Wendy's. I don't know if Wendy's is everywhere, but it was not a great cheeseburger, but it was wise amazing compared to anything else we were eating. So it was expensive too. Pay $10 for, you know, a cheeseburger with no fries, nothing like that, no drink, that's for sure. And you could say to somebody, hey, I'll pay you this much now, I'll give you my Fresh Favors next Friday. And if you had to pay it in advance like that, it was typically just worth the dollar amount. But if you had it for whatever reason, that like you're getting a tattoo on the Friday and you offered it to somebody, sometimes it was even worth more than it was worth because it was so good and everybody wanted it. That was one of the only bright spots in our lives, where when some sweaty dude would make us a gross cheeseburger, that was, you know, that was heaven. So tattoos were a crazy thing. You know, people were getting hepatitis, that's for sure. There wasn't really HIV on the camp I was at. I'm sure some people had it, but it wasn't a common thing. Admittedly, you know, people were really, really good about changing the needles, really good about keeping stuff clean. They wouldn't do a tattoo. I'm sure there's people that are, but like Josh, for example, and everyone that I knew that was doing it wouldn't give a tattoo unless they had something to sanitize the needle with. Now, some people don't know how to sanitize a needle. It needs to be boiled, right? You can't just dunk it in soap. It's not clean. That doesn't kill certain viruses, you know, ones that want to stick with you your whole life. So those are some resilient sons of bitches, but they were really careful about not getting people sick because that could catch them another charge. It could hurt somebody, and believe it or not, not everybody in prison wants to hurt somebody, especially like that, like poisoning somebody with a terrible disease. And yeah, but the guards and, you know, the not the warden, he was never around, but would present it to us like we were little kids. Like, give us the information about why we shouldn't get tattoos, give tattoos like we were little kids. Like, tell us about hepatitis like we'd never heard of it. Tell us about hepatitis like 80% of the people in there hadn't been using needles to inject drugs for 10 years straight. You know, like, we get it. Guys, if you think we're here because we're good at following warnings, you're wrong. Like, that's one of the biggest issues with the prison system is you show up to prison, you've clearly led a life where you haven't been very good at following sound advice, and then they continue to try to give you advice. And it's like, hey, dude, this didn't work before I got sentenced to prison. What about me being here makes you think that telling me it again will finally get it to stick? There's got to be different methods when you get to prison. There's got to be some type of rehabilitation that is not readily available on the street, because trust me, as a drug addict, there is so much advice available. Why don't you just stop? Oh, I don't fucking know. Why didn't I think of that? Duh. Why don't I stop? Stupid question. So, tattoos in prison. Oh boy, I don't think I've taken a breath for 20 minutes. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and I will see you soon. Have a good day. Bye.